think anyone studying philosophy eventually comes across Xeno's paradoxes, and I think usually these paradoxes are taken as kind of puzzles that if you're clever enough you will be able to somehow solve. But I think this might be a mistake or a wasted opportunity. I think that the paradoxes instead point to how fundamentally limited conceptual thinking is in terms of how we understand reality and approach our understanding of truth. Let's take the example of Xeno's paradox of the arrow. So the paradox goes as follows. If you fire an arrow at a target, on the one hand it will hit the target. This is one truth that is a part of the paradox that's incompatible with the second truth, which is that before it can hit the target, it has to get halfway. And from that point, it has to get halfway again. And that actually, that process of having to get halfway will, in theory, repeat endlessly, thus making it impossible that the arrow ever reaches the target. Now, both of these statements are true. This is the problem. They're both true. It is true that the arrow will hit the target, or will reach the destination, but it is also true that the arrow must get halfway and halfway again. And yet they cannot both be true. They seem to have mutually exclusive consequences. Therein lies the very core of the paradox. And philosophers have spent the last 2,000 years or so trying to find ways of resolving this paradox somehow. But I would suggest actually that potentially this simply illustrates how fundamentally impossible it is to really make even the most basic claim using the intellect about the external world. You can certainly use concepts to describe your experience, and that's that. But yeah, I think there's something fundamentally problematic about using thoughts to understand the world. And actually we see this in politics too. We have two opposing positions, and both of those positions often justify that position with something which seems very plausible and true. So, for example, in the abortion debate, you have one side saying it's my body, it's my choice, and there are all of these negative consequences if I don't have an abortion. And on the other hand, you have people saying life is sacred, or it's wrong to kill a living being, or this kind of thing. And these statements have some kind of intuitive plausibility to them, just like our two statements about the arrow. And yet they're both mutually exclusive. And that suggests that shouting these arguments at one another, these facts or truths or statements, no matter how true they seem to be, no matter how convincing they seem to be, it doesn't necessarily actually mean very much in terms of essentially defeating the other position. It's no more meaningful than one person shouting again and again, but the arrow hits the target, and the other person shouting, but it has to get halfway, and then halfway again. I mean, it is possible that both of these statements are true, and yet you can't resolve the mutual exclusivity of those statements. And again, to me, this points to the limitations of conceptual thinking and relying on our feelings around what is and is not a true statement in order to resolve the debates and differences and discussions that we have in the world sometimes. Not that I can necessarily tell you a better way to approach it. I don't think I can. I'm reminded of the quote from Zen Master Dogen that I will leave you with when he famously said, "Things are not as they seem, nor are they otherwise."